Hello, everyone. This is the Measurements Lab. So last week in our introduction lab, we covered the scientific method, and we did a small exercise where we collected some data and then graphed it. This week, we want to focus on measurements. And the first thing I want to discuss are the types of data that we collect. There's two types of data. One type is called qualitative data. Qualitative data is descriptive. What that means is that it just describes the outcome of an experiment. Remember that in lecture we spoke about a flashlight that maybe no longer operates, and we had a couple of competing hypotheses. One hypothesis was that maybe the bulb of the flashlight burnt out and we needed to replace it. The other hypothesis was that maybe the batteries had expired and we needed to replace those. Regardless, we did a couple of experiments, right? Or thought experiments. And in the end, all we were able to report was, does the flashlight work or not? Does it give you light or not? There were no numbers involved. It was just describing the outcome. Another example of a qualitative data or descriptive data would be if I should mix a reagent that is blue with an unknown solution that may or may not contain sugars. If I add the blue solution to the unknown solution to test and see if there's any sugars in there, should the blue solution turn into an orange color, then that means that there's a lot of sugars in there. But if it stays blue, then that means that there's no sugars in there. So in the end, all I'm describing is, did I get a change in color or not? Those would be examples of qualitative data. The other type of data that we can collect is quantitative data. This data is preferred because it's number-based and it tends to be more informative. It just tells you more about the outcome of an experiment. Let's do a simple example. Let's say I were to ask somebody to describe what it's like outside, and they said it's hot. Well, what if somebody were to, instead of saying it's hot, were to say it's 98 degrees? Do you see that one is more informative than the other? 98 degrees is way more informative than simply saying it's hot, because it could be hot at 90 degrees, it could be hot at 98 degrees, it could be hot at 88 degrees. But when you say 98 degrees, we know a little bit more. Another example would be, back to the reagent that tests for the presence of sugars. We said that the reagent is blue naturally, and that it turns orange in the presence of sugars. And all that does, it tells us if sugars are present or not. But what if we then added some sophisticated equipment that could also tell us the quantity of sugars in a solution? Well, that would be way more informative than simply saying there's sugar present. If you could tell me how much sugar there is per milliliter, that's way more informative. So we prefer quantitative data over qualitative data. That doesn't mean that qualitative data is no good. It's effective in its own right, but we have a preference for quantitative data, for one, because it's more informative, and two, because it also lends itself to statistical scrutiny. Take, for example, last week's discussion on the effect of vitamin C on the cold. If we have two groups, and one group with the cold doesn't receive vitamin C, and the group with the cold that does receive vitamin C gets over the cold 7 days earlier than if you didn't take vitamin C, that would be a statistically significant difference, right? I mean, you would be compelled to take vitamin C if you had the cold, if you knew that you would have it 1 week less, right? But on the other hand, if both groups with the cold, one not taking vitamin C and one with vitamin C, if they both have the cold for roughly the same amount of time, say you're not taking vitamin C and you have the cold for 14 days, and then the other group that is taking vitamin C has a cold for 13 days. Well, they had a 1 day fewer, right? But that's not statistically significantly different. And the only reason why we can have this sort of discussion is because quantitative data lends itself to statistical scrutiny, and it's just way more informative to that point, a lot better than qualitative data. All right, so when we do collect data, what are the units that we prefer to use in science? Well, you might have heard of the SI units. The SI units stand for Sistema Internacional. It's an international system of units used by many countries, including the US. But some countries use more than just the SI units. Like the US, we also use an American system, which was handed down historically from England. So when we measure things like length, in the scientific units, we would measure length in meters. I'll abbreviate it M. But in the American system, we can use inches, feet, yards, right? But in the SI units, we stick with meters, and we can have kilometers, meters, millimeters, centimeters, micrometers, nanometers, picometers, but we stay with meters. The SI units also have a specific unit for mass. The base unit is a kilogram. I'm just going to write the gram here, an abbreviated G. But we also have an American system. And in the American system, when we weigh out our produce at the grocery store, we use pounds. It's not the same unit, in fact. Mass is about the amount of substance in an object, whereas pounds or weight is affected by gravity. And so your weight would be different on Earth than it would be on the moon. But regardless of where you are at, the mass is the same for you. So we stick with mass. We can also measure volume. And for volume, we use liters. I'll abbreviate it L. And we also have an American system that measures volume by way of gallons. You were probably thinking that right away. But we can use also pints, quarts. If you like to spend time in the kitchen cooking like I do, you're very commonly going to come across recipes that use cups, half a cup, a third cup, and so on. We can also measure temperature. Temperature, usually in our labs, we like degrees Celsius, but you're probably more comfortable with degrees Fahrenheit. It's probably what you have measuring the temperature in your car, right? It's probably in Fahrenheit. There's also Kelvin. We use Kelvin in chemistry and physics and some specific branches of biology. We can also measure time. But time varies. That depends on the nature of your experiment. If you're a cell and molecular biologist, you might be interested in how fast a reaction takes place. That would be the rate of a reaction. And in those cases, some reactions are going to take place in milliseconds. That's a very, very tiny fraction of time. But if you were an ecologist studying global climate change in the San Bernardino forest, in that case, you might be measuring your time in months and maybe years, most likely in years. Okay, so these are the units that we're going to be using in lab often. And I'd like for you to get comfortable using these units. And so we have some questions for you, some exercises where we hope you'll be able to get a little bit out of the worksheet that we gave you once you've had your little lab kit, your little swag bag lab kit that we assembled for you this semester. Okay, what I want to do next is I want to go over conversions. I want to teach you that the SI units are great for two reasons. One, it standardizes us all so that it doesn't matter if you're doing research in China, Bolivia, or the US, in all of 3 countries, whatever study you're performing, other nation scientists are going to be able to understand the outcome of your experiment because you're using the SI units to report your data. That's one reason why SI units are great. They standardize all scientists around the world. The second reason why they're really great is because it's super easy to convert units within the SI units. All right, so I want to do that next, and I'm going to use length as my example because you're more likely to be comfortable with guessing the length of your pencil or pen in centimeters versus telling me its mass in grams. Like that would be very difficult for you to guess if you're not accustomed to using grams. And it's even worse if you should try to tell me its volume. Like that's just going to be nuts. But you're more likely going to be comfortable with length. So I want to use that example for converting. Okay, so here we go. Let's talk conversions. All right, so we're using length as an example. What is the largest unit of length in the metric system? It would be the kilometer. A kilometer, or the kilo, stands for 1,000. So that literally says 1,000 meters, kilometer, 1,000 of those. So I'm pretty confident that you've seen a meter stick or a yardstick. The meter stick and the yardstick are really, really close to each other in size. The meter stick is actually longer by 3.5 inches or so. But oftentimes when you buy a meter stick, it'll have the metric units on one side, and then on the opposite side, it'll have the yards, okay? And it'll be 36 plus a few extra inches to make it the same length as the meter stick. I have a video where I'll show you that. If you should take a kilometer and break it into 1,000 pieces, every piece would be the meter or the meter stick. If on the other hand, you should take a meter stick and break it into 1,000 pieces, that's going to leave you with a millimeter. Every little piece would be a millimeter. And for some of us, that's already difficult to tell apart. 1 millimeter from another millimeter, it's already straining my eyes. Now, you've probably got better vision than I do. But we can also take a millimeter and we can break it into 1,000 pieces. And when we do that, that's going to bring us to a micrometer. And that's very tiny. A micrometer is a millionth of a meter. So that's like taking this meter stick and breaking it into 1,000,000 pieces. Every little piece would be a micrometer. And at that point, we're now discussing the size of cells. And so it's not a surprise to learn that if you want to look at microscopic cells, you're going to need a microscope, something that allows you to look into the micro size world. And finally, if you should take a micrometer and break it into 1,000 pieces, the individual pieces that are left are now nanometers. That's a billionth of a meter. That is super tiny. This is now the size of molecules like simple sugars, fats, nucleotides. It's also about the size of viruses. So do you see now a relationship between the micrometer, the size of cells, and nanometer, the size of viruses? The smallest cell and the largest virus are still different in size by about 1,000-fold. So if you take a really big cell and a really tiny virus, you can now understand how a virus can get into a cell fairly easily. Or about 1,000 times different in size. Okay, so let's say all of this backwards in summary. How many nanometers do I need to get 1 micrometer? I need 1,000. So the relationship between these two units is a 1,000-fold difference, 1,000x. The difference between a micrometer and a millimeter is also a 1,000-fold difference. And what I mean there is that you need 1,000 micrometers to get 1 millimeter. The difference between a millimeter and a meter is also 1,000-fold difference. You need 1,000 millimeters to get 1 meter. And finally, the trend continues to the kilometer. You need 1,000 meters to get 1 kilometer. It's this divisibility of 1,000-fold that makes conversions very easy, because 1,000 has 3 zeros, and 3 zeros is the same as 3 decimal places. And what that means, or what that implies, is that if you wanted to convert one unit into another, say millimeter to micrometer, all you'd have to do is move your decimal 3 times, 3 places, and that's it. You've converted from millimeters to micrometers. You can also use conversion fractions the way that it's explained in your worksheet in the measurements lab. I'll do one example here, but first I wanted to try teaching you the movement of decimals by 3 places for the 3 zeros in the 1,000-fold divisibility that you see here. Okay, so let's start out with something like 2.5 meters. And we want to convert that, let's say, to millimeters. So we want to go this direction in our scale. So what would I do here? Well, the difference between these 2 units is 1,000-fold, right? 3 zeros. And I'm moving to the right, so I'm just going to move my decimal to the right 3 places. So here's the decimal. I'm going to move it 1 time, 2 times, and add a 0 to hold the decimal in place. And then I'm going to move it a 3rd time, and I'm going to stop. Okay, and so what's my new number? It's now 2,500. 2,500 what? 2,500 millimeters. What was the original number? It was 2.5 meters. So let's circle these 2 numbers, or put them in a box, I meant. Okay, what do we know about these 2 numbers? 2,500 and 2.5. Well, at first they would appear to be 2 totally different numbers, but in fact they're the same exact number. They're just expressed in a different unit. 2,500 millimeters is exactly the same as 2.5 meters. It's the same number. They're just expressed in 2 different units. Let's try it the opposite direction. What if I wanted to turn 2.5 meters into kilometers? So I want to go now this direction. Well, I think you can follow the logic, right? It's consistent. If I wanted to move to the right, I move the decimal place to the right. But if I want to move on the scale to the left, then I need to move my decimal to the left. So here's the decimal. I'm going to go 1 spot, 2 spot, put a 0 there to hold the decimal in place. Go another spot to put the decimal there. Then I can go back and I can erase what I don't need. So what's my new number in kilometers? It's 0.0025 kilometers. Okay, what do I know about all 3 numbers? They're the same exact number. It's just that they're all expressed in a different unit. Okay, I hope that made sense. Let's try it again. This time, let's say that I'm giving you 0.00056 millimeters, and that I wanted you to convert that to nanometers. Whoa, so you're going to have to go 1 station, another station. You're going to have to do this twice. So if I wanted to go from 1 station to the next, to the right, how many zeros is that? That's 3, right? And if I want to go from micrometer to nanometer, that's another 3. So that's a total of 6, correct? So all I have to do now is move my decimal a total of 6 places. In what direction? To the right, because that's where I'm going on the scale. So let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add 1 more, 6. Go back and erase the stuff that you don't need. All right, so what's the new number in nanometers? The new number in nanometers is 560, right? I mean, all these numbers right here aren't going to help you. So it's now 560 nanometers. Again, the original number was 0.00056, and that was in millimeters. So these two numbers are exactly the same. They're just expressed in different units. So you can go backwards and forwards by simply moving your decimal 3 places for every station that you have to go through. Okay, so let's try something a little different to see if you understand this logic, okay? Some of you may be wondering, you know, whatever happened to the centimeter? Maybe you thought about that earlier when I was describing the scale. So the centimeter is located right here. I'm gonna put it in red. This is the centimeter. And I'm gonna erase all this other stuff. Okay, so we don't need all of this. It's my OCD now, and I'm loaded on caffeine, so it's worse. Okay, that looks fairly clean. So let's say that I have something like 28 centimeters, and I want to convert that to kilometers. Okay, what do you do in this case? Well, first you would have to know the relationship between a centimeter and its neighboring units. So what's the relationship between a centimeter and a millimeter? The relationship is a 10-fold difference. Notice now it's not 1,000, it's only 10, right? So if you wanted to convert between centimeter and millimeter, you would only move your decimal 1 decimal place because there's only 1 0 in 10. Remember that in the other units, their divisibility is by 1,000-fold. That's 3 zeros, so you move the decimal 3 places. But here it's only a divisibility of 10. 1 0, 1 decimal place. In the case of centimeter and meter, the difference there is 100-fold. That's 2 zeros, so that means 2 decimal places. But when we go back to meter and kilometer, that goes back to being 1,000, right? Okay, so let's try it now. I want to convert centimeter to kilometer over here. So notice that the number 28 does not have a decimal place in it. It's implied that whenever you come across a number like this, the decimal is always at the back. So it's over here. It can't be here because then that would be 2.8, and that's not the number that we said. We said 28. And it cannot be over here because then that would be 0.28. That's not the same as 28. So whenever there's a number and there's no decimal, you should know that it's always at the back. Okay, so I've got 28, and I need to convert that to kilometers. But first, I'm going to go from centimeter to meter, and the difference there is only 100-fold. That's 2 zeros. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and now I've got 0.28 meters. And then from meter to kilometer, that's another 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. Put my zeros there, put my decimal place there, and get rid of the stuff I don't need. And my new number is 0.00028 kilometers. And I've converted centimeter to kilometer successfully. All right, let's try it again. 28 centimeters, but this time you want to convert it to micrometers. You want to go here. All right, so you're going to the right this time. So let's get rid of this for now. So your decimal is right here, and you want to go to micrometer. So to go from here to this station, how many zeros was that? We agreed that that was only 1, so you go 1. And that gives you millimeters. And then from millimeter to micrometer, that goes back to 3 zeros. So you go 1, 2, 3, put your decimal there, add your zeros back there, and get rid of the stuff you don't need. All right, and so what's your new value? Your new value is 280,000 micrometers. And again, every number that we converted, 28 centimeters, 0.00028 kilometers, 280,000 micrometers. All three of those numbers are the same exact number, but expressed in a different unit. Okay, those are conversions, okay? So if you're really good now with conversions using this system, you're ready to get on your worksheet and start converting. And then maybe use some of the lab kit stuff to help you out. We've included rulers. There's a thermometer in there. You got some nice stuff. If you're having a hard time with this style of conversion and you prefer fraction conversion in the tradition of a math class, then we can do that too, right? We can try that right now. Before we do conversions in that style, I wanted to say that you need to make sure that you get your scale down correct, right? You want to get really good with this scale. And what I'm implying is that in the future, you're going to have a quiz or a lab midterm where you're going to be asked to convert. And you can make mistakes that give you the wrong answer. For example, if you don't get this scaled in the correct order, then your answers might be wrong. So you want to make sure that you get your scale down and commit it to memory and that you're comfortable with it. Another thing I want to say before moving on is that if you wanted to convert grams or liters, it's the same style of conversion. Notice that every prefix unit is the same. Nano, nano, micro, micro, milli, milli. And then we can call this the base unit here. And then kilo. Kiloliter, liter, milliliter, microliter, nanoliter. Again, notice the same prefixes. These are the base units. So if they have the same prefixes, that means that the divisibility is 1,000-fold also for kilogram and also, for grams and also for liters. And so what that means is that you can use the same style of conversion for those units as well. It works the same way. Once you learn it for length, you've actually learned it for mass and for grams. I'm sorry, for volume. I'm talking too fast, I think. By the way, if I'm talking too fast, you can always slow this down or just go back and rewind it. If I talk slow, it's just going to drive you crazy. So this is probably better. Okay, so I agreed that I was going to do one conversion, at least, using the traditional math fraction. But if you don't need to see that, you can just fast forward this. All right, so let's say I've got 2.7, oops. 2.7 millimeters, and I would like to convert that to, let's say, meters. Well, what you would do is you would first multiply by a conversion fraction. The conversion fraction is the relationship between the unit you're at and the unit you want to go to, right? So what is the relationship between those two? We said that 1 meter is the same as 1,000 millimeters, right? So in this case, you would write there's 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. And it's important that you get the millimeter on the denominator, because this way you can cross cancel those units and your answer is going to leave you with the meter unit, which is what you wanted. So mathematically, this is simple. It's 2.7 times 1 divided by 1,000. And so what that's going to give you is, let's see, what are we doing? We're going from millimeter to meter. So it's going to give you 0.0027 meters, and you're done. Let's say that I wanted to convert 2.7 millimeters to micrometers. 2.7 millimeters to micrometers. So this time, again, it's still a conversion fraction, but now I need the relationship between these two units. And what we said is that 1 millimeter has 1,000 micrometers. So you'd say 1 millimeter has 1,000 micrometers. Again, that allows you to cross cancel the millimeters. Oops, so that you're left with micrometers as your unit. And now it's, again, easy math. 2.7 times 1,000 is 2,700 divided by 1. All right, that's still 2,700. So that's your answer. So you can use conversion fractions if you prefer, or you can simply use the scale and moving the decimal places to the left or to the right. I feel that's quicker, and it also kind of makes you look like, wow, you're really good with this math, but you're just moving decimals in your head, right? Okay, so we're done with these conversions. Again, if you're good with these conversions, you can get started on your worksheet, and you can always email me if you get to a question that you don't understand. I would not leave the worksheet to the very end, right? If this thing is due, say, on a Friday, you don't want to start working on it on Friday. You want to give yourself some time to email me, because remember, I have a lot of students and I have a turnaround time of about 24 hours. I try to get to your emails right away, but in the event that I get swamped, I'm giving myself 24 hours to get to your email, and that might not be enough time to help you out, okay? So let's help each other out. You get on it early, figure out where you might have issues, send me your emails, and then I get on it replying and helping you out. Okay, so we've done conversions. I have another video that you're supposed to watch that kind of goes over some of the equipment that we would use in the lab. Not that you're going to be in the lab, but I will be using that equipment in some other exercises, and so I just want you to know what equipment I'm using. Okay, have fun.